Is this? I hope this is working. It doesn't. It does not make my voice louder here, though. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Jan, you're going to sit back just because we're going to have people standing right here. Hi, everybody. If we can get all of your attention. I'm a former teacher, and I was always told, you start on time, so I'm starting on time. Plus, we have so much information to share with you today, you guys, that I'm afraid if we don't get going right away, we'll run out of time. And I dressed in my hiking clothes. I want us to get out for that. Remember I said there'd be a little walk at the end of the event out through the oaks, and I want us to fit that in because I know there's some people that had responded that they would like to have a little bit of information about tree ID, so I don't want us to miss out on that, okay? So I just want to say welcome to all of you to our third program as part of the Environmental Defenders BMP Talks and Tours series. This is a project that the Environmental Defenders Water and Natural Resources Protection Action Team works on collaboratively with the McHenry County Planning Department, specifically the Water Resources Division. And we aim these talks specifically at governmental bodies, schools. I know we have Marengo School here today, and municipalities. We've got Crystal Lake here. I know we notify libraries and other governmental bodies. So welcome to all of you. We're so glad that you're here to learn more today about caring for trees on your properties. I'm Nancy Sheetzelt with the Environmental Defenders. As part of our committee, we also have Cindi Jablonski here. She's chair of our action team. We have Scott Kuykendall here, who is the Water Resources Specialist for the county. And I'm so glad today we have our two interns here for our action team. We've got Nils Gwanzi and Jenna Dedkoff here as well. They're going to be working with us all summer. Let's see, a couple things. I want you to please get up and help yourself to snacks at any time during the couple hours. I don't want to carry those out of here, so please help yourself to cookies and lemonade and tea. And also the bathrooms, if you need them, are just around the corner out there in the hallway. And so I wanted you to know about that. And then lastly, just to make sure that we keep moving so we can get that walk in at the end, I'd like you to hold your questions to the end, please, of each speech. I don't mean the end of the whole thing, but we're going to be starting with Cindi in just a second, and when she's done, then we'll take time for a couple questions, and then we'll go on to our next speaker. So I want to introduce Cindi Jablonski to you today. She is the wildlife ecologist with the McHenry County Conservation District. She has an interesting history, but I guess I won't take time to tell all about that right now, about how she got into this job. But anyway, she's been studying gypsy moths, and so she's going to bring us up to speed on them as the county board in our county has now decided that they would like to collect data on their presence in the county. And in fact, before you leave today, you might want to jot down that website address. Or no, I guess that's a Gmail. No, it's a website, right? Yeah, it's a website. It's an email address. To get if you want to obtain a spongy moth trap, which I think you might be mentioning, Cindi, that's the site where you can get those. And that is the Illinois Department of Ag site. So before you leave, jot that down. Or you can go to the McHenry County Facebook page or website as well. So, Cindi, let's take it away.
Hi, how are you? Oh my God.
Yeah, that's for the
Hi, I'm Cindi Jablonski. I'm going to just go over some biology of spongy moths. First, I want to make sure everyone understands that spongy moth is the same as gypsy moth. There was a name change. So if I slip back and forth to gypsy moth, I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to go over some of the biology of it and then maybe how to control it. On the left, we have an egg casing. I think that's why they call it spongy moth. It looks like a little sponge. In the middle is the caterpillar or the larval stage, and on the right are the adult moths. The males on the left and the females on the right. You'll notice that the male has different antennae. That is to detect pheromones. That's how the female attracts and gets the male to come to her. So there's 4 developmental stages. The eggs are laid in August. A small case can contain 2 to 250 eggs. A large mass can contain as much as 1,000. They're the larvae stage. The larvae passes the winter within the egg and emerges the following spring. After feeding for 6 to 8 weeks, the larvae forms a pupa where the caterpillar will turn into a moth. The adult moth, their only function is to mate. They don't eat. They don't even have mouth parts. The male caterpillars are smaller than the female, and they will grow to 2 inches. The females will grow to 3 inches. And I want you to remember that because we're going to talk about that later. This is the weird thing about spongy moths. The female does not fly. She has vestigial wings. She doesn't fly. She releases pheromones, and the male comes and finds her. So where the females pupate, that's where they lay their eggs. On the left, you can see the pupa. The male is much smaller, the female is much larger. This is a list of their favorite foods and some of the things they don't like so much. So you got your steak, your hamburger, and your broccoli. The only means of dispersal, because the female doesn't fly, is something called ballooning. So when the caterpillars first emerge in early spring, they're very tiny, and they will climb up to the top of the tree. They attach by little silk threads, and the wind takes them wherever it goes. Most of the time it's to the next tree. If there's not a tree there, then there's not a tree there. So it will go up to 150 yards. They have an interesting cycle. Actually, this is a cycle of all wildlife when they have exponential growth. Populations explode for whatever reasons, but those populations cannot maintain themselves. They will either starve, or disease or predators will come in, and then those populations will crash. We had a dry spring in 2022, which caused some populations to increase quite a bit. I don't know what those populations are this year. We can talk about that later. So this is some data that I stole from Wisconsin DNR. They gave a pretty good webinar. 2 entomologists gave it. It was very informative. But this is the data they had in Wisconsin. So in 2010, when they had the last outbreak, they had over 346,000 acres of defoliation, quite a bit. But then the next year, the population crashed and there was nothing. 2022, they had another small spike. The main means of controlling spongy moths is with this pesticide, BT. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Latin name. But it is a bacteria-based pesticide. It's found naturally, and it's highly toxic to the order Lepidoptera, which is all moths and all butterflies in the caterpillar stage. I want you to remember, though, when they make pesticides, they don't just take the bacteria and dump it. There's always chemicals that go with it. Surfactants to make it stick to the leaves, chemicals to make it spread easy through the air. So you're not just getting that bacteria. It's more toxic to smaller caterpillars, less than 1 inch. Once they get over 1 inch, it becomes less effective. And remember, I told you, remember those numbers about how big those caterpillars get? The males get to 2 inches, the females get to 3 inches. So at some point, this pesticide is not going to be effective. But it may be still killing other species of smaller caterpillars. And because of the size factor, they have to spray in early spring. I think they're done now with their second spraying. They do 2 sprayings. They just completed, the Illinois Department of Agriculture completed their second spraying. They have to get it in early spring when those caterpillars are small, so timing is critical. But it's also the time when all species of caterpillars make up most of the biomass in the tree canopies. The long-term toxicity of BTK, the K is a subspecies of BT. It lasts from several days to several weeks depending on the environment conditions. if it's rain and sunlight, will degrade the pesticide. The reduction in caterpillars from spraying BT impacts other wildlife groups. It does kill all the caterpillars from all species in the order Lepidoptera, but it will affect other wildlife groups when you take away that large biomass of caterpillars. The most obvious one is nestlings. All birds feed their young soft-bodied insects. Seed-eating birds do not come out of the eggs eating seeds. They eat small-bodied insects. And caterpillars are the insect of choice because they're high in nutrients and they're easy to catch. And there's a lot of them. So there was research done. Someone actually counted caterpillars that were fed to different species of birds. And Carolina chickadees, does everyone know how big a chickadee is? They're really small. It's a small bird. They eat up to 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars before they leave the nest. That doesn't even count after they leave the nest. They couldn't count those. And it isn't just, there are birds that just eat caterpillars too. So when there's the removal of all those caterpillars from spraying, the parent birds will shift to other insects. But other insects aren't as easy to catch, and there's going to be more competition for those other insects with the other birds who have also lost their food sources for their nestlings. So they're going to be expending more energy to get the other insects, and it leads to smaller clutches, higher mortality, fewer offspring, and lower body mass in fledglings. And here's the literature sightings if you're interested in reading more about that. Other groups that aren't so obvious. Bats, of course, they feed, nocturnally, so they're going to feed on moths. I don't know how many of you know about white nose syndrome, but our bats already have a lot of problems. We have a bat barn in Glacial Park where we have a maternal colony of little brown bats. They've been there for much longer than I've been with the district. But I started doing head counts there in 2014, and we had over 1,400 little brown bats raising young in the bat barn. Last year we had 88, and that was up from the year before when it was 45. So they don't need any more problems like food sources removed from them. Whippoorwills and nighthawks, their populations are declining. When's the last time you saw a whippoorwill or a nighthawk? They depend on night-flying insects. The less obvious ones, and maybe not the most cuddly ones, are the wasps. A lot of wasps eat caterpillars, and the little larvae you see there, the whole family of potter wasps and mason wasps, will deposit an egg in a natural cavity, and then stuff a bunch of little caterpillars in that. So when the egg hatches, the larvae feeds on the caterpillars. So no caterpillars, no food for the young. They don't shift to another food source. That's it, caterpillars. So other ways we can control spongy moths. These are the egg casings. From mid-October to mid-April, you can remove these or spray them with horticultural oil or vegetable oil, right? You use vegetable? Yeah. You can scrape them off, but be careful. If you scrape them off, don't let them just fall on the ground because they will still hatch. You have to put them in a bucket of soapy water to kill them. So you got all winter to do that. And then after they do their ballooning thing, you can put these barriers on trees. There's you could use Vaseline or this horticulture tanglefoot thing. Put some duct tape around the tree because they'll fall on the ground and then they'll climb up the tree. So if you have this barrier, and they're pretty small at that point, then they'll get stuck in that berry and they won't get into your tree. That's what you can do in April, late April. And then of course the spraying takes place in May and early June. After June, and you got caterpillars in your tree, when they're really small, they'll feed most of the time, but when they get bigger, they will come down and only feed at night. They will feed at night and then come down and hide in bark, hide in the leaves at the base of the tree. So you can put up these barriers. There was a nice video that showed it real nicely if you're interested. So you put up a barrier of burlap so that they'll get trapped in there. So you measure your tree and cut the burlap a little longer than the circumference of the tree. And then you wrap it around the tree like that. And the idea is fold it over so they will come down the tree easily, but when they go back up the tree, they'll get trapped in there. And if you have a lot of them, you can use bigger bands of burlap, and you can use multiple bands of burlap. They suggest if there's deep crevices in the tree that you use multiple bands. You have to clean those out regularly. You can't just leave them in there. You have to clean them out and put the caterpillars in a bucket of soapy water. And you can add a little bleach if you want to be really vengeful. You should always wear protective clothing. They have little hairs on them. You don't want pheromones on you. They have a lot of pheromones on them, so wear gloves. And if you want to help for next year, you see the pupae or even the moths, just squish them. So these are the important things that I'd like to bring home. The dispersal of the larvae is only through ballooning. So if there's another tree next to them, they're going to go on the other tree. In McHenry County, our woods are very fragmented. We did a study in the year 2005. We identified 3,000 individual blocks of woods, and 2,800 of them were less than 10 acres in size. So remember that the dispersal method is limited. BT targets all moths and butterfly larvae, and it's effective when they're under an inch. Once they get over an inch, it's not effective anymore. I tried to find out how many species of moths we had in McHenry County. It turns out nobody has a list. So I went on Butterflies and Moths of North America and iNaturalist, where people they submit photos and then they have experts identify the moths and butterflies. So I did that for the northeastern part of Illinois to get some kind of list of verified species of moths in the northeastern part of Illinois, and my list was 574. I'm sure there are many more than that, and that's just the moths. The butterflies, we know that there are 70 species in McHenry County. When this stuff is sprayed, even if the caterpillars are not, or the butterflies are not woodland species, there's always drift. There is always pesticide drift, no matter how careful they are. And if there's a time crunch to get it done by the middle of May and the beginning of June, they can't, they have to spray it. So there's going to be drift. If you have to use pesticides, try not to. But if you have to use them, smaller area is going to have a smaller impact. This kind of aerial spraying, it's not good for large woodlands. And even the Wisconsin webinar that I watched from the entomologists, they stressed several times this is not for mass spraying, this is for smaller areas because it has a large impact. These are two sources of information for you. I also wanted to address, Cindi Jablonski sent me some questions. she said, when do you, the lady asked, when do you spray? When should you know when to spray? My answer to that is avoid it if you can. Avoid using pesticides as often as you can. We in America we reach for the pesticide so easily to solve our problems. So if you can avoid it, don't use it. And then she also said, what was that other question she asked? Oh, she wanted to know about the biocontrol. There's a biocontrol. I'm laughing because I just think it's ridiculous. But in Wisconsin, they sprayed the Door County area in the last infestation in 2010, and it's on the internet on their website. They sprayed a virus that attacks the gypsy moth caterpillar. I can't imagine in this day and age, with all we know about viruses mutating and crossing species barriers, that anyone would choose that. So no, that is not a good idea. What else did she ask? She asked one more.
It was when she registered, asked.
Yeah,
asked
I think that was all she asked. But so what we're doing is we're collecting data. It's always good to collect data. Data is a good thing. Know what you're talking about. You can contact Nancy Johnson with the Illinois Department of Agriculture and ask for some traps, and then you set them out, and then you count the moths that are in them, and then you report back. You'll have to give her the location of the traps, of course. We asked for some for McHenry County District sites, so we'll be doing that too. And that's all I have. Oh, I did want to say I have an example of somebody that had it. And she had gypsy moths, and it was awful, she said, but she worked for a conservation district, and the ecologist said, everything has its cycle. Just calm down, it'll be okay. And it was okay. She did the things with vegetable oil, and she said the next year they didn't come back, and she didn't lose any trees. And she said another interesting thing, that daddy longlegs came out, and their population exploded, and they were eating them all. So something happens, something will take care of it. Okay.
Lisa has a question.
Yes, Lisa.
Cindy, hi.
Hi.
I just had a question. I remember back in 2010 and leading up to that, they were everywhere in McHenry County, and people were really scared. And then 2011, they were gone. So
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, there is a virus. There is a fungus, and predators like, they
That must
come
have
out.
been the year that I'm in Lake County, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
and it was 2010 in Wisconsin too. So every time you have a population explosion, I don't care what it is, something's going to come and take advantage of that, whether it's a fungus or a predator. Something is going to take care of it. If we could just let nature do its thing.
And I can address that as well. I live right at the edge of Covered Bridge Trails in Crystal Lake. Some of you may know where that is. Anyway, the Department of Ag had a couple men show up at our house one day, and they looked all over our property. We have 4 acres, and they looked, and they found a few spongy moths on our trees. But most of what they found was when they got down on their hands and knees and looked under our porch and under our deck. Well, it just was not all that long after that helicopters went over our whole area and sprayed BT. I could have cried. I mean, you think about it. There were very few on the trees. Do you think that spray even hit the ones under our porch or under our deck? But yet, just think of everything they killed. Not only all the other moths and butterflies, but all the birds that died as a result, all the bats that died.
Yeah, there's other stuff in those pesticides, and they bioaccumulate, and it's not safe. I also looked on the Department of Agriculture's website, because I wondered how many, they're calling it safe. How many pesticides do they consider are safe? I looked for general use, there were 10,000. I thought, okay, well, I can't look through that list and see what's safe. So we have a lot of pesticides out there.
And this is the graph from
That
Wisconsin that shows that
is-
same pattern that you're talking about, Lisa.
Yeah.
Where it exploded and then collapsed on itself.
And again, if you would like to get some of the traps for your particular governmental property, or your home even, that's the address you can use right back there, so you can write that down. So let's give Cindy a thank you, and we're going to get our Okay, and if you're watching, or when this video is eventually shown, that address is nancy.johnson@illinois.gov. And our next speaker, we're so glad to have him here. This is Steve Lane. He is the lead forestry consultant with Great Lakes Urban Forestry Management, and he works with over 100 public sector organizations across the Midwest and developing tree inventories, urban forestry management plans, grant writing, and project management from single trees all the way up to populations of thousands of trees. And he'll be providing lots of information for us today on how to best care for trees on your property. So, Steve, welcome him. That's what we need questions. Is it, can you guys, yeah.
I was gonna say I'm a big person, so I'm gonna hide out over here so I'm not blocking my own slideshow. I'm also very loud, so I've given talks like this before where the sound guy was like, "Could you back it off a little bit?" So if anyone on the live stream is getting their ears blown out, let me know and I'll try and hold this a little bit further away. Again, my name is Steve Lane. I'm the past president of the Illinois Arborist Association. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I'm actually an ecologist that I like to say works in urban forestry kind of by accident. A lot of us wind up here that way. We thought we were going to be somewhere else. I think when I graduated college, I figured I'd be wandering around the rainforest somewhere with Sean Connery, finding plant-based cures for cancer. If anyone remembers their late 80s, early 90s movies, and had to pay those student loans off, wound up getting involved with trees, and just have never looked back. It's one of those things I think I've really truly found my true calling in a lot of ways. So. I gave a presentation this past Saturday at Cantini for the Illinois Arborist Association's Advanced Training Program. I did 8 hours on one topic, which is tree selection. That used to be a 16-hour class, but we dropped it down to 8. So you wind me up and let me go. I can talk for a long time uninterrupted. I will admit this presentation, you hear people talk about the knowledge base is a mile wide but an inch deep, or an inch wide and a mile deep. We're going to go pretty scattershot here to some degree, but I'm really just hoping that out of all the stuff that I kind of go over, some of it catches your attention and drives you to want to learn more. Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. There have been people who have been doing it a lot longer than me, and really finding your focus. Arboriculture and natural resources is such a wide topic. Finding your focus, that thing you're interested in, is so important that I figured I'd just go with kind of a wide breadth of stuff. So some folks in here may recognize this slide. I have at least one former student from the Certified Arborist course. So, what is arboriculture? We talk about this. It's the art and science of combining skill and craft with knowledge and scientific rigors. That is actually from the ISA book. So we're now acknowledging that arboriculture is both an art and a science, which I think is kind of a cool thing. We use knowledge of growth and development to diagnose issues, assess genetic potential, and prescribe treatments that are ethical and appropriate. By the way, I'll try not to read my slides that much, but this is one of those ones I can't really get around. And a very important point here is that really we're more like veterinarians than doctors, right? So as arborists, we treat over 100 different species in our area. And those species all need to be treated in a large part individually, because treating an elm versus an ash versus an oak, right? They're completely different species at the genus level, way pretty far up the taxonomic ladder, okay? We also get into some kind of garbagey definitions. Like if you look at the Webster's definition, the cultivation of trees and shrubs for ornamental purposes. No, that is not what arboriculture is anymore these days. So a couple of issues we have. We're a misunderstood and unknown profession. I give talks all over the country. I did one in Knoxville, Tennessee recently where, I think every Uber driver I had, when they asked, "So what do you do for a living?" And I explained what that was, they were like, "Wow, that's really cool. How do I get involved with that?" And I was like, "Well, check and see if you have a pulse. Are you alive? Great. Go down to your local tree care company and tell them you're interested in doing this, because we don't have enough people in this industry right now. So any of you out there that are looking for a career change or advancing your career, if you want to get involved in arboriculture, it's a great thing to do." I like to say we're kind of like Jedis. We're sort of this shadowy organization that people kind of get the gist of what we do, but they don't know. I can take that analogy pretty far. We also have really cool cutting tools, and we swing from ropes occasionally. I'm a sci-fi geek, so really, we also have problems. We can't find employees, right? If one of our climbers leaves for a public sector job, and I know a lot of folks here are public sector, we can't compete with IMRF. I lose a climber, it's 6 months until I can replace that person. There just aren't the people out there doing the work. Right, and we also deal with sometimes this instant expert just add internet thing, which you don't get this in other industries, but for us, like, hey, I did 5 minutes worth of research on ilovetrees.com, and now all of a sudden that's supposed to hold more weight than the 20 years I've been in the business. It's a tough thing, right? You don't see that in medical science all that often. Gee, doc, I was going to do that appendectomy myself, but I'm really busy this weekend. We have that problem in our industry. Largely, what we do is seen as something that, like, well, I could do that myself, but I guess I'll pay you to do it. And we're not represented that well, and nothing against W, right? But this chainsaw is kind of this everyman's tool in the media. Or you get shows like this. I'm not going to name what that show is in case their producers ever track me down and want to sue me. But look at this eye level cut this guy's making with no eye protection. That's abhorrent. All right. I mean, stuff like this drives me crazy, but it's what people think about our industry. We unfortunately suffer from a large public relations issue. We also have a problem with, and don't take this as a negative against volunteerism. We need volunteerism in our industry, okay? We need people getting in on the ground level learning stuff. But right now, I think interest in trees is being outpaced, is it growing at a larger rate than knowledge about it is? I took this clip of the video from YouTube that I forget what the exact name of it was, but it's something like Manitoba man plants 5,000 trees in one day. And all it is this dude with a shovel. He's not planting trees. The name of that video should be Manitoba man kills 4,000 trees, 1,000 might live. He's not engaging in the proper practice of doing a basic thing like planting a seedling. So while we need more people in, and we're glad that people are getting engaged, you folks who come to things like this, it's super important to spread that knowledge out there so that people don't view trees as just this easy thing. Like, oh, trees, yeah, we could do that. There is specialized knowledge in this industry that I wish more people would pick up and learn. So, use that as more of a positive thing. Certified arborist, I just want to touch on this really quick. This is our most basic level of credentialing, so it's through the International Society of Arboriculture. Is anyone here a certified arborist already? All right, at least a handful. Well, I'll bet you a lot of you, especially if you work for public agencies or McHenry County Conservation, you could probably sit for the test tomorrow. 3 years of experience in the field are required. You can get out of some of that if you have a 2-year or a 4-year degree. You don't need to speak fluent English to take the test. The test is actually offered, since the International Society of Arboriculture has really focused on being international, the test is now offered in something like 35 different languages from around the world. We just recently translated it into 2 of the major forms of Chinese. So very, very cool thing that you can do this, right? If you have the knowledge base, the interest in the background, you yourself can become a certified arborist. So I just wanted to put that up to show that the barrier to entry is not really that high, but we also have a ton of other organizations and credentials. So I am also on the editorial board for the American Society of Consulting Arborists. That's more stuff like doing plant appraisal. So if an impaired motorist of some kind takes out one of your trees and you need to figure out how much that tree was worth, that's the kind of stuff we do over in ASCA. I also do litigation work for tree-related injuries and fatalities and that sort of thing. Society of Municipal Arborists. More of a focus on the municipal side. And then the Illinois Arborist Association, I would encourage everybody here to get engaged with IAA. Again, I'm a past president and do a lot of education work with them. And we have a ton of training and education opportunities available, not the least of which is this fall, and every fall we have our state chapter conference down in Tinley Park. That is 2 days of education with a pre-conference session day as well. So if you're looking for like I said, I'm going kind of a mile wide and an inch deep here. If you want to know more about any of these things I'm talking about, link up with IAA, come out to the conference. It's a great time. You'll get to meet people and network and learn a lot more about this kind of stuff.
Real quick, can you click the mic just so that there's a consistent...
You got it. Sorry if I'm waving this thing around. And all right. So just quick mention here too. I said earlier we're more like veterinarians than we are doctors when we deal with trees. There's 73,000 species of trees worldwide. 28,000 in the New World, which is North and South America. About 1,000 species on the North American continent itself. And because I have the question here, where do you think the rest of those trees in the New World are located? Yeah, the tropical rainforest areas. When you get plus or minus 30 degrees, north or south of the equator, that's where we have the greatest biodiversity. We only have about 750 species of trees native to the United States, endemic to the United States. 250 are found in Illinois in some form or another, and about only 120 are found in northern Illinois. And out of these, by the way, I should mention, most of them are fairly uncommon. I mean, really, when you drill down to the nitty-gritty of what species of trees do we see all the time in woodlands and even in the built environment, it's a pretty small list, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons we're working towards building more biodiversity into our planning these days. So. You know, and again, just getting into certified arborist stuff, you know, we go pretty deep. This is from the first class we teach in certified arborist, which is tree biology, because it filters through so much of what we do. But we go into things like cambium, xylem, phloem, teach tree anatomy and physiology, you know, what actual tree tissue looks like, what various protective chemicals are being translocated throughout the tree for all of that. And look at taking deep dives into simple things like photosynthesis, which, you know, I think all of us have this kind of cartoony version of it in our heads as being kind of the standard, but it's a really complicated process at the end of the day. I mean, what happens in the natural world to produce energy is just, it fascinates me, and it's one of those things that I hope fascinates other people as well. You know, when I teach my tree bio class, I go into things like, you know, the standard photosynthesis we think of is actually what's called C3 photosynthesis. But as it turns out, there's other actually common kinds of photosynthesis, like C4 photosynthesis that's done by grasses, and CAM photosynthesis that's done like by plants in the tropics, like pineapples. So again, I have a lot of fun learning new things about stuff that we take for granted. So I just want to stump on that. And you know, one of the things that I think our industry suffers from is not embracing technology. And I actually do a lot of GIS work as well, which is kind of digital mapping work. It's actually not true. We do a lot with trees and tech anymore these days. So, you know, this is just an example of an urban tree canopy assessment that I did for a community where we're looking at actual remote sensing data and figuring out what's grass, what's tree, what's, you know, impervious surface, that kind of stuff. You know, doing big level diversity change analysis. So this, I believe, was actually from the Crystal Lake Park District management plan that we wrote for them a number of years ago. So it's a 20-year plan to manage their tree population through time. And again, this is pretty standard stuff for around here. Most of our built environment tree populations, about 40% maple, you know, honey locust, unfortunately undesirable species. It was a park district, so you bump into quite a lot of those. And I hate that word, and everybody does, using, you know, undesirable species, but there really isn't a better term out there for it than that. And that we're kind of talking about stuff, you know, black cherry, box elder, cottonwood, kind of some of those species that will outcompete the other more desirable native species there. But this as an existing condition is a lot of what, unfortunately, our built environment, our natural environment areas look like. And what we try and do is plan for changing that. So if you look here, you don't even need to read what all of the different pie slices are, but you know, you look at just squint eyes and, you know, look at what's got more diversity in terms of trees. You know, even making a 10% cut in the amount of maples that's out there is a Herculean effort. So again, knowledge is what helps drive all of these things. We also want to deal with messaging some of this stuff. So you know, one of my favorite things to do when I meet people who maybe aren't that jazzed about trees like I am is to break things down to monetary benefits. Not everybody speaks tree. Very few people speak tree, but everybody speaks money. It's the least common denominator we can use. Anyone ever hear of iTree before as a software program? Yeah, so it's peer-reviewed software from the U.S. Forest Service and a number of different private partners that will actually calculate what ecological services trees provide on not just an individual level, but on a population level as well. So whenever we write management plans, we always do iTree reports as a part of that. And the numbers are pretty astounding in terms of what individual trees and populations can be worth. You know, it's real easy to get people to have that wow, you know, aha moment when you talk about stuff like this. Say, hey, do you know that tree population is worth $1.2 million? Wow, I had no idea. You know, or the social benefits of trees. There's all kinds of great data out there from University of Illinois, Trenton, Chicago Public Schools about trees leading to reduced crime rates, increases in memory and learning, better perception of health, reduction in airborne pollutants, and even increased home ownership and sense of community. Some of this stuff's a little tough to wrap your head around as a social science kind of thing, but really the data's good, right? This is all peer-reviewed science that these articles have come out with. So some of the social side of the benefits of planting trees have really started to come into the spotlight recently with a lot of this stuff. So Just a cool thing that I want to mention that is kind of it had just started a number of years ago. I had a hand in helping create this program. But if you're familiar with Open Lands, the nonprofit organization that operates out of the city of Chicago predominantly, we put a sector partnership together between a bunch of different private and public partners, and actually came up with a real bona fide Illinois Department of Labor apprenticeship program that Open Lands is helping to run. So it's a 3-year program, 1 with Open Lands and then 2 with a secondary commercial employer. So like us and Kramer and Davey and a lot of the other major tree care companies in the area will take these folks for the second 2 years. And we're really trying to raise the bar and get people into this industry and make them realize that it's a viable, good industry to be in that takes some intelligence to be in. At the IAA level, the Illinois Arborist Association level, we've been trying to get into high schools and colleges, and it's a tough sell. People look at us and they say, well, why would I want my smart high school students to learn to dig a hole in the ground, right? Because isn't that what you do, is just dig holes in the ground? And, I actually love that. I love the challenge because when I meet with those folks and start talking about the climbing gear and how we calculate static and dynamic loads and the amount of biology and chemistry and other STEM-related things that we have to do, I love seeing that wow, aha moment from them. Like, wow, I had no idea that, all of this kind of went into that. So this is a great step forward in legitimizing what we do. And, if anyone wants to or knows somebody who wants to get into the field, I think there's 6 apprentices this year. They're starting small, but we're hoping that program's really going to gain some traction. So I'm going to skip over that for right now. All right, so on to actual tree care. I wanted to cover just a bunch of housekeeping stuff right up front. All too often when trees have issues, health-related, pest or pathogen or otherwise, the first thing, unfortunately, people reach for is a chainsaw, right? Tree's sick, boy, we better cut it down. And that is not the best way to go about things. Like I was talking about tree benefits before, we've done a bunch of analyses on the return on investment that a tree in a built environment setting provides. Right, so overall, trees provide about a 200% return on investment, which again, if you're one of those people that speaks money but doesn't speak tree, stuff like that is a real fast way to get people interested in this stuff. Right, and we calculate all this out with iTree and actual real-world expenses. So why do we? And bigger trees provide bigger benefits, by the way. I could do 8 hours on just that alone, but it's an important part of what I'm about to say here. Right, we need small trees because they grow into larger trees, but the benefits that trees provide at mature size rates are so astronomically larger than the ones at smaller rates that we really want to encourage people to not only plant trees, but plant them in the right location where they're matching their environmental tolerances and really take care of them for the long term. So, we don't want to just start cutting trees down when we could maintain those benefits by using some cultural practices. So, again, here's a couple of different iTree breakdowns showing, the values of these trees. This was a small community out west of Ottawa, Illinois, right? So their annual benefits the trees provide are $287,000. With a standing value of $4 million, and this I believe is from Glenview, Illinois. They have an annual value of over $1 million with a standing value of $18 million. Wow, right? I love throwing this data out to people so that they can chew on it and really see what those benefits are. So when I want to go through a quick list, and this is not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination, of some of the stuff you're liable to see either in the natural environment or in the built environment that trees can suffer from. So I'm going to look at some biotic factors, which is living stuff, right? Pests, diseases, pathogens. And I'll go through a short couple of things about abiotic factors, which are more like moisture-related, temperature-related, road salt, those kinds of things. So anyone noticing pines and spruces and our evergreens in this area having a really tough time? Yeah. Any ones in particular you see worse than others?
Well, I had I think it's a Mugo pine.
I just took the pile out too.
Yeah, but something's added now that we haven't had for a few years. I attribute it to the
European pine, soft.
I attribute it to the mild winter this year.
So it's funny, actually, in arboricultural circles, we trace this decline in a lot of pines and spruces back to a drought that happened in 2012. it's set this negative feedback loop and positive feedback loop in motion that's still going on, and they're still suffering from that. And you've got these primary and secondary pests coming in and taking advantage of stuff. It's been hard. Some of the biggest things, there's Diplodia tip light and Rhizosphere and needlecast. These are the most common diseases in our area out of dozens of other ones that can affect pines and spruces that you'll see. All right, so they're fungal diseases. These long, cool springs we've been having the last 6 or 7 years have been terrible for these because they create a very conducive environment to fungal growth. Horrible issue for parks where you've got a lot of these screening evergreens out there and they kind of look garbagey and whatnot. And a lot of this stuff lives on the duff layer at the base of trees. So you see that needle layer at the base of pine and spruce trees where those needles are shed. That actual duff can harbor that pathogen, through spore production. So actually, in a lot of ways, and this is to speak to, pesticides, we try and not use them when possible. One of the best things you can do, even as a non-arborist, get some of those needles out of there, right? Sanitation is one of the biggest things in integrated pest management that we try and really focus on right up front, right? Without spraying anything, let's do what we can. Plant different species, right? That diversification thing is such an important part. We just don't have a lot of really tough evergreens in our area. They don't really exist. Eastern red cedar is the best you're gonna do. They're all pretty sensitive and maladapted. Please stop planting Colorado spruce, right? we have kind of a running joke in the industry. Why doesn't Colorado spruce do well here? Because it's not Colorado, right? Sometimes the name is right there. You can treat it with a fungicide. That's honestly, it's not the worst stuff in the world. But you have to spray it 3 times during the spring, right? You have to spray some of the needle duff underneath to make sure that you're not still producing spores down there. And really, you need to have this diagnosed by an arborist because there are about 40 other different things, sneed and whatever else that it could actually be. Zimmerman pine moth, like this down at the bottom. If you see this popcorn growth, that's actually an insect. That's not a fungal pathogen. Oaks, I know we just talked a bunch about spongy moth, which can kill trees. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, through repeated defoliation like that, it absolutely can. Oak wilt is the big one that we're really nervous about right now. It's been decimating oaks in Michigan. It is confirmed in the state of Illinois. It's caused by a fungus, which is Bretziella phagoserium, which also has a new name. It used to be in a different genus. It was Ceratocystis phagoserium. They changed that because, I don't know, taxonomists need something to do occasionally. I still know all goldenrods as Solidago, and now they're split up among oligoneuron and all these other genera, so I routinely get tripped up by that anymore these days. But this one's transmitted by a bark beetle. It's kind of like Dutch elm disease, and actually more commonly through root grafting. Extremely difficult to identify visually. It does require lab testing and from fine branches. You have to send somebody up into the tree to get a sample, send it to a lab where they either culture it or PCR it and then actually give you a positive or negative diagnosis. It's really tough to diagnose, and it causes very rapid decline in oaks. Okay. Now, I would ask if you've been seeing this around recently, but here's the thing is we've actually had a more nefarious thing going on. Not just instead of, but in addition to oak wilt, which is this, we're calling it oak decline for right now. This is an as yet undiagnosed form of Phytophthora, which if, for those of you that are not plant diagnosticians, and I'm not either actually, Phytophthora is kind of like saying the common cold, right? So it's like a coronavirus. There's a lot of different kinds of Phytophtheras out there. To my understanding, and I know a bunch of folks over at Morton and other places that are involved with the science side of this, they're still genetically sequencing this to find out what it is and where it came from. It's part of a disease complex that involves a bunch of other secondary pathogens as well. Again, I could speak on this for a long time if I wanted to, but this one's scary. It's killing oaks across the spectrum. So with oak wilt, there's this thing, white will fight, red are dead. White oaks stand a chance of being able to beat it, red oaks don't. Oak decline, it's everything. I live in a wooded area. We're seeing bur oak going down. I'm seeing red oak going down. It starts with dieback at the tips. If you've been seeing a lot of tip dieback on oaks, it very well could be this oak decline. And this is like a huge issue. Could you imagine what would happen if we couldn't plant oaks anymore in our area? That's scary. That keeps me up at night. So just be aware of this. And if you see this, reach out to the Arboretum, reach out to the state DNR, Department of Agriculture as well. We're trying to figure this out right now, and the prognosis is not great for the moment. We're hoping this is something that can get treated like other phytophthora, but it's a thing. And again, it's happening in addition to oak wilt. So with oak wilt, we actually have to, because of that root grafting thing, you have to trench 5 feet down and sever all of the roots 5 feet down to prevent root grafting. We did a project in Glen Ellen recently where one of their big parks started to show signs of oak wilt. And we basically had to cordon off a big section of one of those parks and start removing trees. Not us personally, but we're doing some of the research on it. There's this table here called a Brune model chart that shows you what distance you have to use based on the diameter. So if I was, I don't know, I think I'm about a 20-inch diameter tree, give or take. If I were a tree trunk, I'd be about 20 inches. So if there were 2 of me within potential root graft distance in our soil type, we would have to use 39 feet per tree. So there would have to be 80 feet between me and the other me in order for the roots not to graft. And if we're closer than that, we got to sever them so that we cut it off. Again, huge problem that's coming into our area. Oaks are going to have a rough run over the next couple of years. So keep your eyes out, report stuff when you see it. We're going to do our best to try and beat this back, but it's tough. How am I doing time-wise, by the way?
What'd you say?
Time-wise?
Oh, it's 10 till 2. Or 9 till 2.
So does that give me like 15?
How much time does he have left to
You
talk?
can go another half hour.
Oh, sweet. Okay, great. Be careful. I might actually do that. So one of the other common ones, we'll get a little bit less scary now, right? And my intent is not to scare you. I'm trying to kind of inspire you to action in a lot of ways. We do have some rough stuff coming down the pipeline in terms of oaks. Apple scab is a little bit less scary. This is caused by a fungus that has kind of a bizarre life cycle. I'm not going to get into all of it right now, but in order for this to propagate, you need ribes, which are gooseberries, present. You need eastern red cedar. You need juniperous species present. And for a complicated lifestyle, but boy, is it sure just everywhere. Before I started working for the company I'm at now, I used to be kind of prejudiced against crab apples, I guess you would say. They always look kind of cruddy, like during the middle of July, the leaves are all falling off, and it's like, can't we just plant something else that looks nice and build some genetic diversity? When you treat them, they actually look really nice. But again, I try not to use chemical treatments as an excuse for everything. So, if you're seeing crab apples or apples that have this, hawthorns also get a version of this called hawthorn rust. Pretty much it defoliates trees, but it won't really kill them per se. It's kind of like, has anyone heard of Japanese beetle before? Yeah, Japanese beetle will completely skeletonize leaves, and it looks terrible. You look at it and you're like, wow, that tree's going to die, but it doesn't really do that. So this is more of an aesthetic issue than anything else. Strategy, boom, you're going to hear me talk a lot about this one. Just plant a more diverse group of small ornamental trees. Just in the 20 minutes I've been sitting here running my mouth, a new cultivar of crabapple has probably come on the market. That's how well, because it is. Look, they've got great flowers and whatever else. We're breeding these for their looks and not necessarily their genetics. But there's I don't want to say a ton, right? I mean, in our very seasonal climate, we don't have the same kind of options available that you do even in the southern part of the state, where I've seen crepe myrtle being grown in Carbondale. But we've got a pretty good selection we can grow from. A large variety of which are actually native trees, right? Serviceberries, redbuds, dogwoods, hawthorns, some that are non-native, right? The tree form hydrangea, if you've ever heard of that one before, it's a little tiny thing, grows on a little, I'm bad with ornamentals, so give me a second here. It's a panicled hydrangea, right, that they've pruned to a single stem form. And if you need that tree that tops out at 10 feet and that's it, that's kind of a cool one to use. Tree lilacs, viburnum, smoke trees. There's actually a pretty wide variety of stuff that's pretty adaptable in our area that you can use. So that's what I always tell people is just look, you want flowering, you want, pick the characteristics you want. There's probably something else out there that's more native and less disease prone that you should be using. The other thing is planting resistant cultivars. So fortunately, the nursery industry, like many other industries, is a money-driven industry, and they figured out that people didn't want to buy as many crabs anymore because they were having issues with this. So instead of just breeding for looks, they did start to breed resistant cultivars, and there's a whole bunch of good ones out there that I have on the next slide if you want to catch a picture of those. And again, good sanitation, right? We want to make sure if the trees are dying, or excuse me, the leaves are dying and piling up underneath, we want to get rid of that source of spores and clean those up. Here's a bunch of resistant scab varieties that you can use. And again, when we do tree inventories, we have a drop-down field for what the species is, what the Latin name is. We used to have a menu for the cultivars, but the problem was it had like 300 entries in it, and like again, every other day we'd have to put a new entry in there, so we don't even bother anymore. But there's actually some pretty resistant varieties of crabapple out there that if you are going to plant a crabapple, you know, look into one of these. ALB, does anyone remember this one? Ever heard of this? One of the gals I work with actually worked for APHIS, the Plant and Health Animal Inspection Services, and dealt with Asian longhorn beetle, or ALB as we call it sometimes, back in the mid-90s when we had our one and only infestation that they were able to quarantine off and get all of those trees out of there. This one's a big problem. So when we had EAB in our area, which is actually a fairly similar beetle in a lot of ways, we lost about an estimated 20% of our deciduous shade cover, and that's natural environment and built environment at the same time. Maples, most communities, 40% maple. If we were ever to get a really bad ALB infestation, it would make EAB look like a picnic, and EAB was devastating ecologically and financially for a lot of different places. So we don't want to see this critter come in. Right? It will make EAB look like a picnic. Identification-wise, this one's pretty easy. You get about pencil-sized holes. With EAB, they were the tiny little D-shaped exit holes that were about the size of a BB. These are going to be a lot bigger and more obvious. And the actual beetle itself is gargantuan compared to EAB, which was again a tiny little thing. Unfortunately, I don't know if anyone actually remembers the movie Braveheart. The Almighty tells me he's pretty sure he can get me out of this mess, but he's pretty sure you're screwed. ALB, early detection and quarantine is really all we got. There's no chemical treatment that's really effective practically. Can you put enough insecticide on ALB to kill it? Yes. However, at the volume you need to spray that stuff or inject it, you're way outside of the label rate and you're killing a bunch of non-target organisms. So, you know, you can use imidacloprid as a preventative, which is a neonicotinoid insecticide. And I'm not endorsing that product. I just want to be very clear about that. I'm just saying it is something that has been used. But again, with the size of the beetle being what it is, there's no real, once it's got it, there's no real control method per se. So again, that monitoring is super important. You know, keeping your eyes out. That's the other thing. Citizen science, that term alternatively drives me nuts sometimes because not everybody is actually a scientist that's out there in the ether doing this stuff. But having people that have their eyes out looking for it is a very important thing. Spotted lanternfly. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this one. This is the nouveau critter that's coming into our area that everyone's kind of worried about. It is native to China, India, and Vietnam. This one's weird. It came in on pallets of flagstone. So EAB came in on woody material. This one was actually transported in on egg sacks, I believe, that were on stone. We don't have near the inspection budget that we could really use in this country to prevent this stuff. And I would love to grab somebody's ear at some point and talk to them about how much money EAB cost us and how just having a couple more people doing some of those inspections might prevent that. But it's a tough sell. You know, this is not in our area yet that I'm aware of. Does anyone here have any data to the contrary? It's knocking on the door. You know, so western Pennsylvania into Ohio, I believe, was the last known extent. And this one affects a wide range of stuff too. It is gregarious. It will form, this is an actual picture, it will form just clusters of these bugs. It does a real number on orchard crops like grapes and stone fruits. So like Michigan in particular is really worried about this one because it could decimate their orchard industry. I remember one of the first times I saw a presentation on this. Does anyone know what the preferred tree that this lives on actually is? Yeah. Oh, did I put something up there? Yeah. Damn it. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I beat myself to my own joke there. But, you know, yeah, when I first went to a talk on this at Morton, they were like, well, it lives on Ailanthus. We're like, awesome. Biocontrol. Like, you know, what seems to be the problem? But it does affect so many other trees that, you know, it's something we really want to look out for. Early detection and reporting is very easy to ID. It's actually very pretty in the traditional sense of the word, looking critter, pretty hard to mistake for just about anything else. Great opportunity for local outreach and citizen reporting. And as of right now, what I've heard is the best control method we have is if you see these kind of dried clay-like egg sacs, you scrape them, you smash them. Physical control is one of the best ways to go about it for right now. So, this has been a big topic recently. And there's, like I said, I could do this for hours. There's other stuff that was supposed to come into the area that has not to this point materialized. I don't know if anyone's heard of thousand cankers disease. I know it's a really gross name, right? That one was supposed to be like DED, but for walnut trees, and it's just never materialized. It's in Tennessee, it's in southern Illinois, it's in Colorado, but it has yet to materialize out here. And I know some pathologists who have been saying that it might be because our winters are too cold, that the actual, either the fungus or the beetle won't survive the winters. But it was supposed to get here like 3 years ago, and it is yet to materialize. So. There's a big, if you were like an insect or I'm not a critter person. My wife is the critter person between the two of us. I'm a plant person. But if you wanted to get into doing pathology like this and doing insect and disease stuff, there's just a wide open market for being able to do stuff like that right now in our area. And with all the stuff we're going to be dealing with, we would love it if you would get engaged on that. So. Abiotic stuff. I'm gonna bust through this pretty quick so we don't go too long here. Right, abiotic factors are the non-living components of the ecosystem that still affect what we do. Right. Again, I said I'm an ecologist by trade. Ecology, by dictionary definition, is literally the study of biotic and abiotic factors in an environment and how those things interact together. So there's a lot of stuff we suffer from that's abiotic. Salt. It's one of the big ones in our area, and I always like to remind people just. When I say salt, that doesn't just mean sodium chloride or even calcium chloride, like any of the traditional salts we think of. Chemically speaking, salts are any acid-base reaction that creates solutes of positive and negative charge. So ammonium nitrate, which is fertilizer. Fertilizer burn, same thing as salt damage. Like literally the exact same thing. There is no difference functionally for what that is. It screws up the osmotic balance in the root zone. Instead of water flowing into the roots, it flows out of the roots, which dries the plants out. So I don't care if it's fertilizer or salt or a little combination of both. It pretty much does the same thing. What are the solutions to that? Planting salt or nutrient-tolerant trees. I do tree planting plans for municipalities pretty frequently where, if we have areas on, primary roads or where there's intersections where, the salt truck passes by in both directions and you get a lot of additional salt there, we'll pick trees that are really salt tolerant, like Kentucky coffee tree, or some of those other, hybrid elms, whatnot, that can actually tolerate a high amount of salt. Reducing dependence on salt-based snowmelt applications, that's a big one. And I know a couple of folks that have switched over to either, I believe it's the beet sugar or a couple other ones. They're more expensive, but in the long term, when you figure out that a tree is $500 to purchase and install, and every time you lose one, it's another $500. Right, you gotta balance all of that out in the P&L statement there. So installing proper irrigation, and my little joking thing here, the solution to pollution is dilution. If we've got, but here it works. If we've got too much salt in the soil, increasing the amount of water we put through there can take some of that stuff out. You can put stuff like gypsum in the soil, but programmatically, I'm pretty against amending soil. I always like to say when I teach soil science that you cannot change soil. That's not what we do. We can amend it. I can change its characteristics for a little while, but it's got tremendous buffering capacity. Soil's got a long memory, as I've heard people say. It's always going to go back to what that parent material is. So, or occasionally, don't plant a tree. I teach that in tree planting classes. I do occasionally, right? If I'm in that tree coffin, the 3x3 tree pit, maybe I'll just put an above ground planter with some annuals in it or something like that, right? There are times when it's just not efficient or a good idea to plant trees. Right, drought stress, very similar thing. By the way, nice early season drought we're in right now. Again, just in talking with people around the industry, this has been really annoying, doesn't even begin to describe it, but we've been locked in this cycle for the last 6 years where we get an early season warm up, And then it cools off to about 50 degrees and rainy, like Oregon weather. I did my undergrad in Oregon, so it's very, very Oregon-like. And then all of a sudden it pops out of that in like late June, and now we're in drought conditions until September hits. It's really stressful environment for trees. And now we're not even getting the rain that we're supposed to be getting right now, and we're directly in drought. It's been really rough. Again, what do we do about it? Select drought-tolerant species. Don't plant what you can't afford to water. Anyone here that works for a public agency, I am really big on this, as are many people. During EAB, we saw this very engineering solution come along to tree planting. Well, we removed 700 trees this year, so we better plant 700 trees. No, because you can't water 700 trees. And if you can't water them, chances are, and especially droughty conditions, they're going to die. So, you know, we want to make sure that when we're doing tree plantings, we're only planting what we have the wherewithal to water. And in case anyone thinks that watering is easy or inexpensive, well, I guess it is easy, right? I mean, watering a tree correctly is not rocket science. It's very expensive to do. Either manpower or time to pay somebody to do that. It's an extremely time-consuming process. So, you know, quality over quantity when it comes to tree planting, right? Get the species you want, get them in the areas you want. Don't just settle for numbers on that. Urban heat islands, in this neck of the woods, you suffer from this less than some other areas. But when we get a lot of impervious surface, not enough vegetation, we increase that drought and that heat to the point where we can actually get heat damage that can burn leaves. By the way, tree planting is like the EPA's solution in a lot of ways to reducing CO2 and preventing the urban heat island effect. It's quite literally like on the first page of their reporting, we should be planting more trees to abate these effects. So all these cool things that are going on now with green roofs and, you know, some of the stuff in Italy where they're literally building like full-size vegetation into skyscrapers and stuff. I think we're coming into a very cool age where technology and innovation is kind of helping us do some of this, but it is definitely a problem. This is a project we did for Gary, Indiana's Parks Department, and this was to try and determine where we have the greatest need for trees. And you don't even need a legend up here to read this. Like, where do you think it's the hottest? Right. So that's pretty easy. You know, and concomitant with that is flooding, right? One of the big issues you're seeing with trees now is to use them to abate stormwater management issues. The more water those trees suck out of the ground, the less it taxes our stormwater infrastructure, right? Which directly increases the amount of time those things can be there before they need to be replaced, which saves us money, right? I don't have to go too far logically to prove that case. So, you know, you have lots of kind of cool engineered solutions right now, these stormwater tree pits, you know, even just planting trees in detention and retention basins, which is not always smiled upon. It's not always the best idea. But if I'm looking to really move a lot of water in or out, using those hydric soil tolerant trees is actually a really good idea. All right, and again, same community. This is still Gary. You don't need to know what's on the map over here. Just realize if there's shading on here, it's either a wetland or a floodplain or hydric soils or one of those things. And so, you know, you juxtapose this map with that one and you go, you know, that's where it's hottest, but it's still pretty hot down here. And then you go over here and say, well, look, you know, boy, we actually have an area right through here where increased tree planting can help two factors. We can offset urban heat islands and get some stormwater benefit from it at the same time. So, like I said, we're using trees and technology pretty efficiently anymore these days. And that's not just me. That's a lot of different organizations that are kind of starting to realize the benefit of this. Airborne pollutants. This is another thing that the iTree software really looks at. You know, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and whatnot, volatile organic compounds. Right? Some trees are more tolerant of this stuff than others. There are some trees that are just not urban tolerant. Red oak, unfortunately, is one of those trees that it'll do just fine on a secondary road or in your backyard. On a primary road, they suffer from all kinds of pollution issues. We just can't get them to grow very well in those areas. But look, if you're in an area where you've got more airborne pollution than not, there are certain selections you can pick out that are a little tougher. Hackberries, hybrid elms, swamp white oak, actually, believe it or not, is one of the tougher rootstocks and tougher plants that will tolerate some foliar salt, some soil salt, and whatever else. In fact, a lot of the white oak family trees that we buy in our area are actually grafted onto swamp white rootstock because of the how well that rootstock actually performs. it's severe weather. It's kind of just a, honorable mention. All of the planning we try and do for things like stormwater and heat islands and, disease prevention and whatnot. Look, it can all go away tomorrow. I was just talking with a client over in Addison who, they had an F3 tornado come through there late last year. How do you plan for that? It's hard, right? Storm response is one of those things we have to consider, but we just don't have a magic wand for. And then they lived. It's okay. I love the time up here too, like 3:13 in the afternoon, man. Happy hour must have been just absolutely out of control on that. But we actually see a lot of this in the built environment, where you get people running over trees. Like, there's something. My point is, there's some things that, despite our best planning, we literally just can't do anything about. But in kind of wrapping this up, one of the things I do want to harp on is the wrong tree in the wrong site. Up until recently, I would say, we've been very kind of reactive about tree planting. When we contract nurseries, they only grow about 10 species regularly because they're the ones that they know are hardy enough to live. Nurseries have to guarantee plants for 2 years, so they want to make sure they're not replacing a bunch of trees. So it's autumn blaze maple, honey locust, little leaf linden. You get the idea. They know they can plant those trees just about anywhere, but you can really open the planting palette up quite a bit if you look, and this is the class I taught last week, the 8-hour one. If you try and match those species characteristics to where they can, in the built environment, be somewhat similar, you can grow a lot of stuff. So, nursery folks I used to talk to were scared to death of planting American hornbeam on the parkway. It doesn't live. If you put it in full sun, it doesn't live. That's an understory tree. Everywhere it occurs in nature. You give it the best conditions possible in full sun, that tree just does not do well. It's genetically hardwired to not do well in full sun. You find a shady spot out on the parkway, it's perfectly adapted to clay. It evolved in clay soils in our area. But you put that in a shady site, it does just fine. So trying to be more targeted about where we're planting trees in areas that match their tolerances, right? So, on a city parkway, we're not necessarily, or in your backyard, you don't have true hydric soils, right? If you put a soil probe down there, you're not going to be looking at natural soil. But you will bump into areas where it's lower lying and there's going to be more water there than not. And so there's where you want to plant a hydric soil tolerant plant. Again, on the ecological side, we've been doing this for ages. In urban forestry, this is kind of newish, which to me is funny, but look, we're trying to make ourselves better all the time. I always say look for clues in nature. If I've got a low-lying spot on the terrain, well, I want to find something that's going to grow well in a riparian environment, right? This is why certain things like London plane tree, right, which is very closely related to sycamore, do really well in those wet sites. I realize the city parkway is not an upland oak savanna, but if I find a nice shady spot on my parkway, well, then I could plant an understory tree there, right? So again, clearly I'm not saying these are the same, but they have some characteristics that overlap that we can take advantage of. And this is where, just a quick screenshot of some planning work I've done before where this is Fox Valley Park District. All the pink areas here are where there are mapped hydric soils. I believe NWI wetlands are down here. And we actually took a look at, well, how much soil volume do we have? What kind of light level does this space have? And we kind of retrofit that to the plant, right? So say, well, we got a wetter site, full sunlight. Well, what's a good choice there? How about bald cypress, right? It likes all of those characteristics. Or in this case, it was a larch because we had hydric soils, a little bit of shade and protection, so. Right? And that doesn't mean we need to ignore design. Here's 5 kinds of trees with actually relatively similar looking leaves that we could use together to create a similar look, but while still building that diversity. And then just a couple last minute things, poor planting bid specs. For any of you that work for public agencies, all the planning in the world goes out the window if the thing's not installed properly or if they don't tarp it properly from the nursery to the job site. So make sure when you write your specs, they're tight and you can rely on them. And the other thing is death by homeowners. And I don't mean this to cast homeowners or residents in a negative light, but look, not everybody's a tree expert. And a lot of times, especially in a municipal situation, that tree gets planted in front of their homes. They're excited. They say, boy, that tree looks thirsty. I'm going to give it some water. Boy, it looks hungry. I'm going to give it some food. And so they put the soaker hose down there, and they dump a bunch of 20-20-20 turf fertilizer on there. And, before you know it, the root system's drowned. They've burned the roots off from too much, they meant to do well, but at the end of the day, wound up killing a tree. So that's where, again, information is our best ally. When we put new trees out in communities now, we'll make sure that we spend the, whatever it is, $1.25 on a stamp and a one-page letter that says, hello, resident at 123 Johnson Street. Your new bald cypress, requires this kind of care. If it's been more than 2 weeks, you may want to go out there and throw some water on it, but please don't water it every day. It's already got slow-release organic fertilizer in the root ball. Please don't put fertilizer on it. And simple information like that can prevent a lot of issues that arise from well-meaning folks who just don't know what the reality can be sometimes. Okay, I swear I'm almost done. Very exciting thing that's going on here right now is, has anyone heard of the IRA funding that's out there? Couple folks. Good. I'm glad. So we in urban forestry have traditionally been living, and even traditional forestry, have been living on like starvation wages, right? You want money for stormwater, it's out there. You want money for, whatever. There's money out there for a lot of different initiatives. In forestry, the grants that we usually get every year are $25,000. I mean, what your streets department can do with $25,000? Nothing. They can't buy enough material to fix another road. They can't hire somebody. But in forestry, we're like 25 grand. All right. You have all these communities tripping over each other for this. So because of the Inflation Reduction Act, they finally have said at the federal level, we're going to give these folks some money and see what they can do with it. So it's a very exciting time right now. Unfortunately, the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, just closed for this. So June 1st, all the submittals were due. But I do want to let you know, you get 4 bites at this apple. The first one has passed, but there are a lot of organizations like the Morton Arboretum and a few others that applied for funding for you. So IDNR, Morton, Trees Forever, there's a number of other different organizations that went in and said, yeah, we're requesting tens of millions of dollars. And they're going to make that funding available to communities and end users this fall. Right? So this fall, that's called pass-through funding. This fall, there's going to be a bunch of pass-through funding opportunities. It's for tree planting and activities related to that. So inventories, management plans, risk assessments. You can even hire staff with that money, which for federal dollars is bizarre. Usually that's on a list of 3 things you usually can't do. No land, no staff, no equipment. With this, still no land and maybe equipment if you sell it right, but staff, either contracted or in-house, they'll actually fund that. And they'll actually fund the work to get done, which I'm thrilled about. With these management plans, we have this big problem. If we go into a town, we inventory the trees, we put a big report together, we tell them all this stuff that needs to get done, but then there's no money to actually do the stuff, right? And so, you come back 4 years later and they're like, yep, still pretty doom and gloom. With this, they'll actually grant you some money to get the removals done, to do the tree planting, to do the assessments of where you want to put that stuff. So, and if you're an underserved community, which unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know how you really look at that, in Illinois, you could complain about our tax structure and a lot of stuff, but the thing is, when you look on a federal level, we are not underfunded, right? We have our needs met pretty well with the tax dollars that we have spent. So like, I met with the city of Aurora's grant writer the other day, and they're like 50% underserved based on this map. So it's hard for them to, it's hard for you to actually be a true underserved community in this state. But if you are, you can apply for a 0 match. So usually all these grants are dollar for dollar. You get $1, you gotta spend $1. With these, you can apply for a waiver so that you don't have to spend a nickel. So I'm working with a group of folks right now that are trying to get, like Gary, Indiana, a $50 million no match grant. And they're gonna get it because it's Gary, and they've, no offense, I love that town, but they just don't have a lot of resources. So, right? I just want to make people aware that this is out there, and that, again, just because you missed the bus right now, this fall is going to be passed through, and I'm sorry I didn't finish that thought. Next spring, there is highly likely, I can't guarantee it, but there's highly likely to be another NOFO that you can apply directly to the feds, similar dollar amounts, and then there's going to be another round of pass-through funding. There may or may not be another repeat of that in 2025 if they have money left over. But I will say this, the long-term goal of this, and I know this from talking to a couple of folks pretty high up the food chain, the long-term goal of this is to say, you know what, look at what we were able to do with this kind of money. Maybe, just maybe, this is worth investing in at the federal level. Even if it's not, $1.5 billion going forward, our federal dollars for urban forestry are usually about $50 million. Okay, that's those $25,000 grants I was talking about. If we can even have a federal investment of $500 million every year. That would be 10 times what we're used to living off of. We could do some pretty amazing stuff with that. So they're hoping that when this is done, it's looked at as a viable investment. It was a good choice, and that we can just get used to living with a little bit of funding at our backs, which I think would be a great thing, and really kind of bring this profession into the limelight. So again, we want to end that scarcity mentality that we've always had in urban forestry. We just have to scratch and claw for every nickel. Especially with like park districts, for some reason, it always drives us crazy in forestry. It's like the $1.5 million splash pad always passes budget, no problem. The $20,000 tree inventory, well, I don't know, maybe we can wait on that till next year. So it is really time to not think with scarcity anymore, but really like, what could we do if we actually had some money? Put those proposals together and get in line for some funding. So. What the heck? It's the last slide. I'm going to do this. So I always like to leave people just something to think about. Anyone ever heard of the Ship of Theseus paradox before? So it's a philosophical thing. Guy Heraclitus, if you ever heard of the only constant in life is change, same guy. But what it basically says is, if I have a ship and I replace every part of that ship, the mast, the sails, the decking, little bit, one at a time, right? And over time, I replace every single piece of that ship. Is it still the same ship it once was? All right, and there's no good answer. It's a thought experiment. It's just meant to get you to think. But I do like to kind of put this up here about our industry and what we do. We don't have the answers yet, okay? We're still working on figuring out who we're going to be down the road. And it's a great, exciting time because we finally have some funding at our backs. We're in the process of swapping out the masts and changing the decking. We're building a ship in the middle of the ocean right now. And I just want to hopefully maybe inspire a couple of folks to get on board and help us do those replacements, help build what this is going to finally look like. Because again, it's not something that's been around forever. We're correcting mistakes of the past right now. So again, I just like to leave you on a little cliffhanger. That's my info. That is my actual cell phone number, which has not come back to burn me yet, but I'm sure at some point it will. I'm always happy to answer questions, be a sounding board or whatever else. So thanks for having me out, and we'll see you around.
I love trees, but I didn't have any idea how much they're involved.
Yeah, sorry, I threw a lot of stuff out there, but that's.
I know a few of you in here know a lot of this already, but I know others are probably as clueless on a lot of this I am. So anyone have questions before we get? And Lisa, if you can come on up and get ready up here. But Lisa had a question too. We'll start with Cindi while Lisa's coming up.
I was just excited because I looked at the USDA about these forestry grants, and it looks like Illinois got the second most money after California. So we've got lots of money allocated to us. But my question was, so I thought about all these trees, and then what about shrubs?
That's another whole 8-hour lecture.
It is. Well, no, so it's actually kind of funny. Like we actually, my field staff, some of them have been doing this for 15 years. We argue with each other about tree versus shrub. We one time saw a button bush that got pruned to a single stem, and we were like, "Boy, that's a real noodle scratcher. Is this a shrub anymore? Is it a tree?" Shrubs are a very important part of this, and when you with the grants especially lumped in as woody perennials, yes, they if you're asking for grant reasons, they generally fall into the same category. So yeah. To a point. I mean, when you get into like, it's red osier dogwood, like, yeah, but.
Well, I'm thinking about the value to wildlife too. But
Yes.
And then Lisa, you had a question.
Oh, I did. So it was about the oak wilt.
Yes.
So I know people in McHenry County who have had good success with treating their oaks with, I think it's alum. It's a fungicide
Yes.
that they inject into it. And actually a Defenders board member, Ed Elliott,
And I know does that.
has done that and swears by it.
Yeah, and propiconazole is the
Okay.
Alamo is one of the trade names. Propiconazole is the actual chemical, but
Okay.
it's been shown to be effective. Part of the problem is that it's the red oaks, right? The
Right.
red are dead.
Yeah.
White, you could probably keep them alive for a really long time, but the red oaks, once they have it, it's kind of like Dutch elm disease. Like when an elm's got Dutch elm disease, you can treat it and it's going to slow the decline, but it will eventually get it. So, but I also, we don't know everything right now, and I'm not a pathologist, so if they're having great success and other people continue to have success, then
He swears by it, yeah.
So I know on our property, we have been told by whichever tree company, I won't name any tree company, but we were told by them that the tree deaths that are occurring on our property go back to that drought, like you were saying, clear back in 2012. That amazed me that would still have that effect.
We had oaks, or actually maples up in Michigan, that were trained red at the end of July in 2012. I mean, the amount of stress that the trees were put under is pretty unbelievable that year.
So, well, thank you so much, Steve. I think we need to have you back sometime. Maybe next year we'll repeat this. So, thank you. So our last speaker today is Lisa Hatterline. A lot of you probably already know her. She has been the executive director of TL of the Land Conservancy for over 20 years, where they've preserved over 3,000 acres of land during that time. And additionally, she just started her second term on the Harvard City Council, which is working to qualify or to become qualified as a Tree City USA city. And she will be informing us now today about TLC's Project Quercus project, but also their 5,000 acres project. I hope I have the name right. Their Oak Keepers project and their work with two towns in the county, Woodstock and Trout Valley, on managing the oak woods on their city properties. And that might be something that would interest some of the other governmental bodies that are here. So, Lisa, take it away.
Stand over on that side.
Yeah, come over here for the video.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there you go.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. Okay, does that work? Everyone can hear me? Okay, great. So Lisa Hatterline, Nancy did a good introduction. Just thought of something in relation to what Steve was talking about with the federal funding. Two great places to connect with are the Morton Arboretum's Chicago Region Trees Initiative. Great, they'll send you lots of information. They'll make sure you're aware of any of these grant deadlines and things coming up, so make sure you're connected to them. And then also Michael Brunk, who is the urban forest manager or something like that with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. It's just michael.brunk@illinois.gov, and he also does a weekly email that he sends out that has all sorts of information on trees in Illinois and beyond. And yeah, he's another tremendous resource. And finally, I would encourage any municipality, if you aren't already applied for and enrolled as a Tree City USA, I'd encourage you to do that. What you'll find is that most cities are already spending at least $2 a resident on tree care, tree removal, anything related to trees. I'm in Harvard. Harvard is actually the only community in McHenry County that qualifies as an underserved community. And we, prior to even thinking about Tree City USA, we were already spending over $2 a person on trees, in part because we had to take down so many ash trees. Anyway, so Tree City USA, great program and a great way to sort of get in the queue for some of these resources that are going to be coming. Oh, what am I? Okay. No. Uh-oh.
You made us all disappear. We're in an alternate universe.
Which one?
That's the.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you. So just a little bit about the Land Conservancy, 501c3 nonprofit organization incorporated in 1991. We've preserved over 3,200 acres, mostly through accepting donated conservation easements on private property, but we've also acquired
about 900 acres of land, and we've more recently gotten into purchasing conservation easements on farmland using federal funds to do that, so that's kind of cool. But we're supported by our members, grants, fundraising events, non-governmental organization, and these are a list of some of our programs at the bottom there, and Project Quercus is what I'll talk about here. So Project Quercus is, we started it in 2007, and it's gone through a lot of iterations, but currently we're doing a lot to plant oaks with public agencies in particular. We partner with certain municipalities, it's now up to 3. And then we started our 5,000 acres program in 2020, right before the pandemic, which it's a little, can't see it great, but this is this is the study that Cindi talked about, that the McHenry County Conservation District completed in 2007. You can see all of the black areas on there are the remaining oak woods. If it weren't quite so bright, you could also see grayed areas that would show that about 40% of the county had oak woods before European settlers moved here in the 1830s. So this is what's left. The green areas are conservation district sites, and you can look at the bottom there to see the totals. So we went from 140 some thousand acres of oaks to 18,000 in 2005. Right now there's about 15,000. We've continued to lose oaks, and 85% of them are on private property, which that's when this report was coming out, Ed Collins, who's been at the Conservation District for a long time and was one of the authors of this study, he looked at me and he said, "That's your job." I'm like, ah. So anyway, so that was when Project Quercus was started, was 2007, when this report was released, because we said, wow, 85% of the oaks that remain in the county are on private property, and that's who we work with primarily, private landowners. So Project Quercus, one of the first things that we started doing was planting oaks on public land. It's available to any McHenry County government, townships, municipalities, park districts. The only requirements are that you have an appropriate site, you make a commitment to allow trees to live out their natural lives. I mean, we're not a government agency, so we don't have police or something to enforce that, but we do ask municipalities or townships to make that commitment, you know, at least the current board, to say, yes, our intention is that they'll live out their natural lives.
And schools.
And schools, exactly, absolutely. Yes. And then that either they have a group identified that can do the planting, or we have different groups that we work with that we know that are looking for sites, places to plant oaks. And I'll give you an example. At Merriman Park in Woodstock, we worked with City of Woodstock and with a family who was donating 50 oaks as a 50-year wedding anniversary gift to 2 family members. And so they were looking for a site where they could plant 50 oaks and where they would be respected and taken care of. So they ended up going in at Merriman Park, which is on the north side of Woodstock. There were no trees. There were no trees there. So Woodstock was very happy to have trees planted there. We worked with them on the location to make sure it was a spot. It was an area that wouldn't interrupt with the park, which is mostly ball fields. And then the family members all came together and they planted the trees. So Woodstock in that case just provided the site, and yeah, so it worked out really well. This is just to give you an idea of some of the places around the county where we've planted oaks. We've planted thousands since 2008 when we started. And again, working with schools, parks, cities, villages, planting at village halls. Port Barrington, which is right near here, for several years did an Arbor Day oak planting with us, and their village elected officials would come out and plant the tree. At schools, we've planted them. We've planted some on private land where it's actually been, where it's preserved, permanently preserved. And then service organizations like Kiwanis, Rotary, students, we did for several years, we planted at least 100 trees a year at Three Oaks Recreation Area in Crystal Lake, working with a school, with sixth graders, I think it was sixth graders, who would come out for 2 days and would plant they planted hundreds of trees there to get trees growing out there, and that was really fun. So it's, you know, scout troops, what have you. We've worked with all sorts of groups. Oops. Yeah, so that's, so I just want you to be aware that that's a resource, that we're happy to work with your unit of government or your community group. If you're with a community group and you're interested in planting oaks, we can match you up. We also, over the years, have partnered with several municipalities, most recently Bull Valley, but Woodstock since 2007, they have quite a few natural areas that the city owns, and we've worked with them to manage under contract those areas. The idea being that they didn't have anybody on staff who could manage those areas or knew anything, as the city administrator at the time said, so they contracted with us to manage these areas, and we developed management plans, and so for a very, reasonable cost, we've sort of become their de facto naturalists and have been managing about 120 acres, including about 90 acres of oaks since 2007, and just signed another 3-year agreement to do that. It's just worked out really well for both of us. In Trout Valley, we also helped them. It's a much smaller scale, but helped them with grant writing under a contract, and then volunteer recruitment to manage the Trout Valley Fen, which includes quite a nice area of oak woods. And Trout Valley has a lot of oaks. If you see it on the map, if you haven't ever been there, you see it just on an aerial map of McHenry County, and you're looking at Cary, and then you see this area where it's like, is that a park or what? Because it's like almost solid trees. Yeah, and that's Trout Valley. And then Bull Valley, we've partnered with them on different things over the years, but more recently we partnered with them to preserve 324 acres of land, which includes 41 acres of remnant oak woods, and we're also advising them on restoration and management of other village-owned oak woods. So we're a resource available to local municipalities. Then go on to the 5,000 acre challenge, which we started, as I said, in 2020 was when we kicked it off, right before COVID. So that was, it was sort of delayed the actual launch. But the idea was that, if you remember a few slides ago, there are about 15,000 acres of remnant oak woods in McHenry County at this point. And so we worked with someone to advise us from a marketing standpoint. How do we start reaching all of those people? Because like I said, it's 85% of those trees on private property. And so how do we reach them? And so they said, well, let's try a challenge. Let's try something that's maybe catchy and that people want to be part of. So we created a website, 5000acres.com, logo, 5,000 acre challenge, with the goal being to get to 5,000 of those 15, to identifying 5,000 of those that are actually being managed, that are being taken care of, and then building from there. So when we started, there were 3,784 acres that were already either protected, that were somehow protected and managed somehow. So either owned by the state, the DNR, the Conservation District, local park districts like Crystal Lake, the Land Conservancy. So, okay, we're good bit of the way there. So it's like, okay, so to get to 5,000, we just have the 1,267 to go. So we promoted that. Now, since 2020, there's over 105, I think it's over 105 now, have registered their oak woods. What they do is they go to the website, 5000acres.com, and just, they can type in their address, they can see if there was, historically, if their property had oaks. And in some cases, it's kind of cool because they'll be really surprised that maybe they've got 3 oaks now, but it was all oaks historically. But then they can, if they're interested, they can sign up to register their oaks. They tell us the acreage. They tell us what they're doing to manage their oaks. And if they do that and give us their email address, then we'll actually give them a 6-month membership. And they're eligible for a site visit from our Conservation at Home program manager, Sarah. And so she'll actually go out and walk the woods with them and give them some ideas on how to manage them. So at this point, still have 561 acres to go to get to the 5,000, but it's encouraging. And then once we hit the 5,000, we'll have to come up with a whole new campaign.
10,000.
Yes, 10,000, there you go. So let's see. But our main partners with this have been Davy Tree. They've been great at sharing the information with some of their customers in McHenry County when they feel it's appropriate. And then the municipalities of Trout Valley and Bull Valley, because both of those communities have a very lot of oaks in those communities. And so they've done mailings and email information to their residents to let them know about this program and to try to get them engaged. And we have had a good number of signups in both of those communities. And then I just finished with just people love their oaks. And this is just a sweet couple and with their dog who got cut off in the picture somehow. But Roscoe, and they like to say Roscoe likes their oak trees the most of all their trees. So, but I'll just leave you again with this slide that we've got these 3 main programs right now. We plant oaks and we're happy to work with any community group or municipality, local government. We're also available to work with municipalities on natural land management, including oaks. And then the 5,000 Acres program is something that's free that, we can, if there's something you want to send out to some residents or offer them, if you know somebody that has oaks that's looking for help and you want to send them to that website, it's easy to remember, 5000acres.com, and they can reach out and we'll help them. We'll help them figure it out.
So Lisa, they should just Google the Land Conservancy then?
Yes, and I've got some cards back here if you want a card.
For
And
the school system, have you guys ever had project workers come there and plant oaks? This would be fabulous. These 2 gentlemen are Marengo schools.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, the close, Marengo, for some reason, we haven't had a good connection there. Riley School. We did a really nice planting at Riley School. But yeah, we'd love to do that.
Just down the road on 176.
Yeah, I know. We are. Yeah.
Well, in fact, I worked at Stanford, didn't I?
Yeah, Riley. Yeah.
I worked the first 4 years.
You did.
Project work.
She did. Nancy, she was.
So I'm proud of that program.
Yeah, I meant to include a picture of you.
You what?
I was going to include a picture of you. Yeah. I ran out of time.
Help get that
Yes,
started,
you did.
And I decided I was too old to keep cutting all the wires and doing all that digging. Well, I didn't actually do digging. Well,
Never too old, Nancy.
anyway.
Never too old.
So anyway, questions from Lisa?
Any questions?
And things that you've all seen, though, you've all heard, things that you can reach out to the Land Conservancy and they are a source there that you may not have realized where you could get help. So, Cindi.
Well, Lisa, I was wondering about working with like homeowners associations. I'm just thinking about like Wonder Lake. There's all, at least around the lake,
Yeah.
there's lots of oaks there, but that some parts of Wonder Lake are in the village, but there's
Yeah.
also some very strong homeowners associations there.
Yeah, and I know Sarah McHale, who's we call her position is community ecologist, and she does a lot of our outreach with individuals, but also communities and homeowners associations. And I think there's one in, can't remember the name, but I think there's one in Wonder Lake she has done a program for.
Yeah, she came out and helped us evaluate the Nippersick Watershed Association evaluate the islands in Wonder Lake, which
Oh,
are actually
yeah.
tops of caves.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
But all
And
comes-
yeah, but I know there's a couple maybe 3 in Crystal Lake that she's consulted with. Yeah, so definitely, very definitely. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, so one of Steve's points was homeowners that don't really know how to take care of things. As I recall, Project Quirk has a educational component
Yes.
to it.
Yes.
Wondering if you talk a little bit more about that for
Yes.
educating homeowners on how to care for trees
Yeah.
that they do care about.
Yes, absolutely. And I've got copies of a brochure that we put together. That was thinking about it now as I think back. That was one of the first things that we put together. I think back in 2007 was just a real simple brochure of how to take care of your oaks, how to be a good neighbor to your oak trees in terms of not mowing under them and what you plant, and not spreading chemicals under them, and not letting bad stuff. Those what did you call those trees? The undesirables? Yeah, undesirables. Like which I think of as buckthorn honeysuckle, not letting them grow up under your trees. So and then also some information on how to on both like tree identification, what type of tree you have, and then how to estimate the age, which is kind of fun. But I've got some copies of the brochures here too.
Well, let's think. One more question too.
Oh.
Well, just something that Lisa knows about that you just might mention. Can you mention the RCPP program that's
Sure.
for oaks?
Yeah. So the American Bird Conservancy has received approval for a what's called a resource conservation partnership program.
That's right.
I think that's it. Yeah, RCPP, which is through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's sort of like a block grant from the Department of Agriculture, where they're getting, I think it's $5.8 million to be spent over 5 years in southeastern Wisconsin and northeastern Illinois on improving projects to improve private oak woodland habitat to benefit woodland birds like red-headed woodpeckers, pileated woodpeckers. I'm not a bird expert. Yeah, warblers, yeah, that need the oaks, that really depend on the oaks. So there's going to be, there's an outside chance that by November that the U.S. Department of Agriculture, working with them, they'll be able to start taking applications, but it's more likely it'll be next spring that they'll be able to have the people on the ground and the resources together to actually start writing contracts with private property owners who have oak woods that they'd like to take care of. They'd like to get some assistance to manage them. So yeah, thank you, Cindy, for
so what's the best
reminding
way
that.
for people interested in that to, would they reach out to the Land Conservancy?
Yeah, they can reach out to us for now, just because it's not quite off the ground yet, but we're in contact with American Bird Conservancy, and we're one of their local partners. So we'll be working with them to connect them with landowners, because obviously they're not currently on the ground here, so they don't have those relationships, but we do.
Right.
So we've already, we've got a list that will keep growing, I'm sure, by the time, because they've been working on this for about 3 years. So, yeah.
Well, thank you,
Yeah,
Lisa, very,
sure.
very much.
Thank you.
It's so great to hear about all these programs that you can enter into with organizations and the information about the money is available and so forth. Steve, is there a chance for the people that are, I know there are some people that indicated they were interested in tree ID, and I don't know if those people are still here or not, but if they are, and if there would be anybody that would like to wander through the oak woodlands out here a little bit, just slightly over down the hill of the building. So, maybe I should ask, is there anyone that still wants to do a little oak woodland walk? I would like, yeah. Okay, well, Steve, do you have anything you have to take from in here?
Yeah, I gotta grab it.
Okay, I'm not sure what time they're gonna close the building, but if you would just follow Steve,